Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello. I can't reach the tissues, bear with me. Amanda, I know that for you, today is truly the revealing of something that for some time, perhaps what seemed to you a very, very long time, was indeed something only you and God could see. But today it's real. You're no longer dreaming, and we're all here. And I could not be more happy than to be with you on this day. For those of you who may be wondering, I met Amanda when, shall we say, she was between churches. And just for today, I'll share with you my memory of one day saying to her, you know, there's this church in Mission Hills that I think you might like. It's not up to me to tell you Amanda's faith journey. She's already shared that with us through her ordination process, but I will comment on it, because that is why we are here today, to celebrate how God has called God's daughter to the ordained service of God's people. I've been very lucky and blessed in my own ministry. You see, I've served alongside Amanda at the Elizabeth Hospice. I know the high ethical standards that Amanda not only holds herself to, but lives out in all aspects of her life and ministry. And in the interest of full disclosure, she has been the best friend to me. But I'm also thrilled for the UCC, the denomination of my own heritage, to be officially welcoming and recognizing the ministerial roles that she has already been serving in for many years. Today, we are welcoming Amanda home. Amanda chose the scriptures today for their theme. She's long told me that the story of Joseph is her favorite narrative in the Bible. But it occurs to me that this narrative is also one that in many ways mirrors her own journey to this day. Some time ago, my husband Ed, after listening to myself and probably Amanda and perhaps a few other friends talk about our calls to ministry, struggles in ministry, the politics of ordination, and being recognized by various ecclesiastical structures, suggested we start a website to share our experiences in a fun, egalitarian, and non-censored way. I'm not an exhibitionist, so I was really pretty hesitant. But Amanda thought this was the best idea since red wine. So we did it. We started that website, and somewhere in the process, Amanda was writing her bio and came up with the title for herself, The SBC Exile. Many of you know that Amanda was raised in the Southern Baptist Convention. It's a tradition full of biblical conversation and social custom. It's a tradition that taught Amanda how to love God, to know the scriptures just as well, if not better, than anyone in this room. And even how to answer God's call upon her heart. God's call. Now, most of us know that when God calls us, really calls us, God often calls us out of the garden, out of Ur, out of the land of our ancestors, out of our nations, out of our closets, out of our comfortable lives, and yes, even out of our churches. In this respect, Amanda is no different than other people who have been called by God. And yet, her story, like all of ours, is unique. Her story brings us back to Joseph. You see, Joseph had gifts of insight and understanding that led those closest to him to ridicule him, to injure him spiritually and psychically, if not physically, and to lead him away as a stranger into a land he knew little of. Amanda shared an experience with us during her ecclesiastical council. The experience was that although she was able to tutor the male students whom she worked alongside of in her native churches, she was not allowed to apply for the job they applied for. The full application of her gifts could not be welcomed. Now, we like to think that churches are sterling places, that nothing harmful ever happens within their walls. Hopefully, many of us here today know better, even if we never dare say it. But I know it. I know other colleagues who know this, and Amanda knows it too. And so, much like Joseph, Amanda found herself in this strange land, among people who did strange things, like theologize on the basis of experience. And slowly, the SBC exile found herself at home among us. Amanda has been a member of the UCC for a few years now. She has shared her gifts with the Mission Hills congregation. She has demonstrated and lived her commitments to value the inclusion of diverse people within all of our churches. Her experience of being excluded from leadership due to gender. Her experience of being alienated within faith communities due to the perceived mental health issues of people around her have shaped her understanding of social justice, have shaped her understanding of what it means to be church. And they are also experiences that have shaped her call. God has called her to further study at the intersection of psychology and spiritual community. Today, Amanda is a hospice chaplain to adults and children at the end of life and their families. But God is still calling her. And I believe it is vitally important that we in the UCC continue to nurture and support Amanda not only in her hospice call, but also in her call to do the Psy.D degree that she's working on in Seattle. For this is truly a call to explore the connection between faith community and psychology. And I will say to those of you who have assembled today that I actually do tremble when I consider this newest call Amanda has embarked upon. The interweaving of psychology and systems of faith communities could very, very well be God calling her out once again, out of the box of the church, to do a truly new thing for God's people and Christ's church. And Amanda, I'm not the only one among your hospice colleagues to believe this. But we're here now. And today is special. Today, Amanda, we gather around you to recognize your gifts for preaching, teaching, pastoral care, your amazing administrative skills, to affirm all that you bring with you from all of your experiences to serve among us. We come to lay hands on you, to recognize and confirm your call and gifts for the ministries you are called to now and the ones you'll be called to in the future. Yet as we gather to recall your narrative, to acknowledge your call, and to set you apart for ordained ministry for the continuation of your journey, you have placed this text before us. A text in which those who were once oppressors find themselves in need and ask, what if Joseph still holds a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him? Now, in the church, perhaps particularly in the UCC, with all of our commitments to social justice, we understand the temptation to thumb your nose at the naysayers, to wipe the dust from your feet as you move on, ignoring them. But that's not the story. That's not even ever an option for Joseph. For this narrative is not the story of the oppressed exacting revenge. It is the story of the oppressed journeying with God into the unknown. It is a story so focused on the future that there is little time for the past. And in referring to the past, Joseph says only, even though you intended to do me harm, God intended it for good. God has intended this for good. It is one of the major responses of grace and forgiveness and reconciliation we find anywhere in our scripture. And Amanda, it is my hope for you today that the past becomes the past, that somehow all of us together assembled around you can somehow pause the flow of time just for one moment and simply be here now. It is also my hope that as we ordain you today, there is also a mystical meeting of Joseph and his brothers. Or something like what process theology would call a concrescence of past events, so as to allow for a new future. A future in which you are not bound by gender, perceptions of normal, or even known understandings of ministry. You see, the heart of the Joseph narrative is nothing less than the unrevealing of a new history for a whole people. One that only God and perhaps in time Joseph could see. Yes, Joseph embraces his brothers, heals a rift between family and faith and nations. But it's not just about Joseph and his brothers. It's really about what happens next, isn't it? It is a welcome home. But it is also a, so you're here now. What do you want to do? Amanda, you've waited a long time for this day. And I dare say many of us here have also awaited this day. Because we want to say, welcome, welcome home. But then the only thing to say next is, well, what do you want to do? We know what Joseph did next, and what his people did after that. But that's as far as our stories journey with theirs. In the here and now, life is complicated. People have modern problems. People get sick and live while dying. People suffer violence and hunger and poverty and exclusion, even within the faith communities. People live with great fear and loneliness, and they never find rest. These complications, these meetings in life, are the ones in which our choices to be gracious or not are the ones in which our true spirit shine through. Even then, we don't always know how to respond, except to speak kindly, except to pray the words from the letter of Romans that quote, the very Spirit intercede with sighs too deep for words. We don't always know how to respond, because in the difficult situations it can be very, very difficult. When what we really want to desperately ask is, do you have any idea what you have put me through? But then we remember the prayer that Jesus prayed in the Gospel of John, that they may all be one. And we take a deep breath, and we see the other person before us as truly a child of God. We remember the story, and we allow something new to unfold. We muster up our courage and simply say, do not be afraid. You are welcome here. Welcome home. Welcome home.